Hey guys, I'm Nathan with Duck River Honey, and today we're going to talk about beginning beekeeping. I love bees, I love beekeeping, and I think the world needs more of both. Unfortunately, there is a steep learning curve when you start out beekeeping. Honeybees are not like any other creature that most people have experience with, and because of this knowledge gap, a lot of beekeepers get started and then they lose their bees over the first year or two, and they don't know why, and they get disappointed and they give up. My goal is to close that knowledge gap, to encourage people to start beekeeping and then to give them the knowledge that they need to be successful once they do start. If I can do that, if I can encourage you to start beekeeping and then help you to be successful once you do start, I think there's a good chance you're going to fall in love with beekeeping and you'll stick with it. The reason I'm doing this is that honeybees and native pollinators are under a lot of pressure these days through urbanization, through monoculture agriculture, through pesticides, introduced pests and parasites. There's a ton of issues facing pollinators today, and we need more people to care about pollinators. And nobody cares about pollinators like beekeepers. So I am going to try to encourage people to start beekeeping and then to stick with it once they do start. So I want to get started by talking about the big picture of beekeeping because I think that's the most difficult to understand. It's great to learn a lot about the individual cogs and wheels of beekeeping, but unless you understand how all those cogs mesh together, then you're never going to make truly informed decisions starting out. Now this is really important because before you get started, you've got a clean slate. You can go with shallow equipment or medium boxes or deeps or horizontal hives, anything. You can go any direction that you want to go. But once you make a decision on equipment and you have bees in that equipment and they've drawn comb, you are married to it. You are married to it at that point because it's very difficult and expensive to change equipment down the road. So you do need to make some decisions on the front end, and I'm going to try my best to help you make decisions that make sense for you. So this is going to be a series of videos, and I'm going to do my absolute best to make these short and simple to understand for anyone. There is a lot of intricate knowledge that you can get about beekeeping, but I'm going to try to keep it as short and simple as possible. Now, some videos in the series will be longer by necessity. I've got a couple planned that will take me a full year to shoot. This is going to be a comprehensive series, but in small, easy to understand bites. So guys, if you don't want to miss upcoming videos in this series, then please subscribe to my channel and hit the bell for notifications. So the big picture of beekeeping. At its simplest, beekeeping is a relationship between bees and people. And because of that, you've got 2 points of view. You've got what the bees want, and you've got what the beekeeper wants. And these are different. They're very different at times. So I'm going to start with the honeybee side of the equation here because honestly, bees are simpler than people are. People do all sorts of silly things for silly reasons, but if you understand honeybees' motivations, they're usually pretty logical in what they do. So honeybees really only have 2 major motivations. The first and foremost is the survival and success of their hive. When they check that box, they have survived, they are successful, then they want to reproduce through swarming. Swarming helps ensure the survival of the species. So these 2 simple motivations have huge ramifications for the beekeeper and how we interact with the bees. Their survival and success motivation is the main reason that they hoard food. So honeybees eat nectar and pollen, and there aren't flowers blooming in the winter, so they build up these huge food stores and they make it shelf stable in the form of bee bread and honey. This intense hoarding instinct that they have means that they can create a huge surplus of honey that we as beekeepers can take off the hives and utilize. That same food gathering and hoarding tendency that they have can have negative ramifications as well. If a strong hive can go out and overpower a weaker hive, they will do so and rob out all of their honey and food stores and bring that back to their own hive. They care about their own hive to the exclusion of all others. Bees can be utterly ruthless at certain times of year, and that's called robbing season, when there's a nectar dearth and things like that going on. So as beekeepers, we need to understand these motivations and why the bees do what they do and know how to deal with them. Swarming is how honeybee colonies reproduce, and bees love to swarm if they can. It just makes them really happy to swarm. It doesn't make beekeepers happy though, because it depopulates that mother hive to the point that it probably won't make a honey crop, and if the beekeeper can't catch that swarm when it's hanging in a tree somewhere, then you've just lost $150 worth of bees, plus you've lost potentially hundreds of dollars in honey production. So swarming can really impact beekeepers in a negative way. Beekeeper motivations are much more complicated than the bees' motivations because our actions reflect our individual goals. And this is a key point that I want to make. You need to decide up front what your goals are. I'll give you some examples. Do you want to be a hobby beekeeper that has a few hives in their backyard to get great garden pollination and hopefully to get some honey for your own personal use and to give away to friends and family at Christmas? You can definitely do that with beekeeping. Do you want to have a hobby that pays for itself? You can do that with beekeeping. Do you want to have a side business that actually earns a profit? You can do that with beekeeping. Do you want to build a company that is your full-time job that employs other people and is big enough that you can pass it down to your kids someday? You can do that with beekeeping. So again, I encourage you to know what your goals are going in and build your plan around those goals. So to end this section, I want to talk about the beekeeper's workload and what you can expect. Besides equipment and maintenance, which you typically do in the off-season, which would be winter, there's really three things that our hive management revolve around. That's going to be swarm prevention, honey production, and the ways that colonies die. Swarm prevention is typically in the spring of the year. Honey production is typically summer. And then the ways that hives die, there's really three, and these would be year-round. You've got queen issues, where a queen dies and they can't replace her, or they try to replace her and it doesn't work. Colony without a queen can't turn over its population, and all the bees will eventually die and that colony will cease to exist. Number two would be the varroa mite. And you're going to hear a lot about varroa mites because they're a major problem. They were accidentally introduced to our European honeybees in the 1950s, and since then, hundreds of millions of honeybee colonies around the world have died because of varroa mites. In one way or another, you are going to deal with varroa mites. The third way that colonies die is food, or lack thereof, either during a dearth in the summer typically, or they don't have enough food to make it through the winter. Now with all three of these, a colony living on its own is going to perish from one of those eventually, more than likely. But with the help of beekeepers, we can intervene in all three of those cases and help promote colony health or fix those issues. The next video in this series I'm going to title Understanding Honeybees, and it will specifically deal with some of the intricacies of honeybees, how they live, how they reproduce, how they die, what they need to survive, and some beekeeping practices that we can use to direct their behavior for the benefit of mankind. Guys, I want to close by encouraging you to start beekeeping. I think beekeeping is a hobby that almost everyone can do, and it's something that almost every age class of people can do. This is something that 80-year-olds can do or 10-year-olds can do. So it can be a lifelong passion for you. It's just a good thing to get into. So I appreciate you watching. I'll see you on the next one.